Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Paige Roberts. Pleasure to meet you, Paige.
Thank you.
She's a poet and archivist and a poet. She's presently the archivist at the prestigious Oliver Wendell Holmes Library at Phillips Academy, Andover. And she's also, she's had a very distinguished career, State Library of Massachusetts. She was the head of special collections. She's worked at the Beverly and Lawrence Historical Society. She was the president of the New England Archives. And she was also involved for years in urban planning in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Welcome, and we are glad to have you here. So tell me, a lot of people don't know what an archivist is. Just don't put things in boxes or whatever it is.
Right.
What does an archivist do?
In some ways, I guess I like to talk about it almost as a little bit like the library. And maybe it's important to say I'm a one-person operation. So I do everything from bringing collections in, mostly working with donors. In my case, that's alumni. Preservation issues, which on a sort of large scale can include looking at things like climate control and security of collections, storage, things like that. There's processing and cataloging of collections. The collections that I'm responsible for now are actually pretty extensive. So it is one area that I haven't had as much time to work on, and have had to use student help and now kind of consultant help to work on organizing collections. The goal obviously being to make them more accessible for research.
How does one make them more accessible for research?
Well, there's really a different philosophy about a lot of the approach in archives as opposed to the way that maybe a librarian might approach book collections or whatever other collections in a sort of regular library. And that's because collections in archives tend to be much larger and often unique or certainly rare, and sometimes fragile. So generally we approach things at a larger scale, I guess you could say, based on the office that created the record. So if you think about, let's say, the National Archives, you're looking at records created by whatever the office is, the White House or the Office of Energy, whatever, and same at a school. So the office of the head of the school, the office of dean of faculty, for instance. So there are going to be materials in there that maybe need to be restricted, for instance, for some reason, confidentiality or something. So that's part of what I kind of have to sort of attend to some of those issues of privacy. I would say I'm most busy probably like with helping people with research, which is probably the most fun for me, and having classes come in.
Now, you have a lot of scholars coming in to do research at your library also?
Whether other people do or not, I consider even some of the students at Phillips Academy to be scholars. So yeah, there are questions from students, from alumni, and from outside researchers, which includes family historians, scholars, even journalists. The Globe did a really terrific piece on Jeb Bush's time at Andover, in part based on some of the research that the journalist did in the archives.
I remember my experience with an archive at the Mugar Library. They're very prestigious.
Right.
And I was doing research on Henry Roth for my thesis. And you got to put on the gloves, right? And you have to go through this little box, they have to bring the box out, and then this guy looking at you. I remember him saying, watch that kid,
Right.
Right. And
exactly. So the security is important because unlike in a regular library, where if something goes walking away, right, you can always just buy another copy.
Yeah,
but
right.
in an archives, if that original letter, happens to go into someone's bag, you're never going to get that back. So it's really up to us to try to pay attention to that and try to make researchers aware that that's important.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a pretty time-consuming part of the job, I guess, and that can partly relate to the fact of sort of this how well collections are processed, which in my case, they're sort of minimally processed, I guess,
Okay.
So therefore, it can be harder to find things people need. So, and there are even other things that I do, promotion, let's say, I build a website. Digitization is a big part of it, digital preservation. I'm also responsible for records management, all the records of the school, not just those that will come to the archives, but also things like, let's say, accounts payable records from the comptroller office that need to be shredded after 7 years.
Let me ask you a question. You remember card catalogs, of course,
Of
right?
course, right.
There's still any left there?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we do. In fact, I have this great...
Is it a working one or just there as a monument?
Yeah, I mean, both.
Yeah.
Both, yeah. I've got one for this, this really voluminous correspondence of this head of school, headmaster there in the early 20th century, and there must be about 10 file cabinets. So maybe, several, 10,000 letters, something. And so this card catalog is extensive. The problem with it really is that it's handwritten in various types of handwriting. So it's not really even possible to scan it, let's say, and then put that online, right? Because you couldn't really read that. So I've sort of started having students help me to try to transcribe what's in the catalog. But it just, after, a year and a half, we got up to maybe C,
Yes.
alphabetically, yeah.
And I guess in that regard, I keep having trouble with it. Digitalization is better because, obviously you can see, the writing is clear, the fonts are clear, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It just depends on the original. Yeah.
Now the Oliver Wendell Holmes library has a lot of interesting artifacts, documents. That you could maybe give us a little smattering of what's there.
Right. So archives refers to the institutional records, sort of administrative records of the school. And special collections refers to records or papers of other organizations and individuals, and also rare books. So I'm responsible for all of that. And there's really an interesting mix. For instance, in terms of manuscripts, we have some papers of the alum Henry Stimson, who was
Secretary of Treasury, wasn't he?
Secretary of War.
Oh, under FDR.
During World War II, yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he was president of the board of Phillips Academy. So there's just interesting, photographs of him, in a Jeep in Europe at the same time that he's coming to Andover to, let's say, run a board meeting or something. Mm-hmm. So there's that collection. We have a really fantastic collection of papers, early correspondence of the Phillips family, the founding family, which also was the founding family of Exeter.
Phillips were sort of old blue blood family, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep, they were a long line of very conservative Protestant, well, even Calvinist ministers in the town of Andover.
Fire and brimstone type of thing.
Yeah, probably verging on that. Yeah, definitely pretty conservative. So even the school in the kind of early mid 19th century really basically forced out a Unitarian minister. That's how conservative they were.
And so what else?
But there are really some fantastic rare books in there too.
What is the definition of a rare book? Just that there's not many editions of it?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure if I know offhand if there's a kind of rigid or discrete way to define that. If it really, obviously, to some extent, it must be based on rarity.
Right. But,
which can be for various reasons, right? That, let's say, not many were published in the first place. Or that it
wasn't a very good book.
Or that it wasn't a very good book, or over many, many centuries, many have disappeared.
If it wasn't a very good book, why would you, for instance, collect something like that?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, maybe for other reasons. another way to look at it might be the book as an artifact.
Right.
What does this tell us about the history of the book, kind of?
It's interesting because
at a certain point in time.
When I spoke to the curator of the Woodbury Room, was Don Scher, who's now the head of Poetry Magazine, and I guess he told me, or he told Harris, our mutual friend Harris, that he collects books for two reasons. One is literary merit, and the other is if they're literary, or they're characters, characters in the community, or something like that. So I can't, my poetry's all right, and I noticed I was in this big deal collection. It was probably because I was a character, and there's also, then there's the big, Hemingway and all this other stuff.
Exactly.
So I think there, in ways there are,
Right, and to a certain extent, a collection, even of an institution, is going to reflect the interests of the donors.
Now,
we're not buying, and so the material is coming from alums, right? And so if, this one person had an interest in this sort of arcane field or whatever.
Right. I mean, like, for instance, if you were in New York and you were an archivist at the New York Library, and there was this famous character who was writing, Greenwich Village Bohemian, sort of a nut, but he was very famous in Greenwich Village, writing a history of the world, and he carried this big book around. It was all gibberish.
Right.
But you'd probably want to have it in the collection, right?
Exactly.
Or the Inman Diaries, for instance. Do you ever familiar with
No.
those? This guy holed himself up in a Back Bay hotel room, and he would interview common people like prostitutes.
Wow.
And it was poorly written, horribly dull, but it did show, it gave a slice
actually
of life,
documented.
and it's collected at the Boston Public Library.
Wow.
It was called the Inman Diaries. I think he was insane also. He had a stint at McLean, where I work also. But it is an interesting artifact. You're right. Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I would hope my work has a little literary merit.
I think so. I think so.
But,
yeah.
Now, so you're talking about digitizing all this stuff, and do you have to, a lot of libraries, I remember Nicholas Baker, I believe it was decrying the fact that
Nicholson Baker
was decrying the fact that books are being thrown out of libraries and and they're being digitized.
Right.
Tell me what's your thoughts on that?
I guess in short, that's not my approach. And I would say most of my colleagues, we really see digitization as a tool for improving and enhancing access to the collections, not in any way for preservation. The only way in which digitization supports preservation really is because it limits handling of the original. So if something's really fragile, that's another reason.
Are you actually taking each page? I remember going to the Harvard Wieden Library, a little guy just sat there all day taking pictures of each page.
Right. So, well, this might be an interesting sort of entree into talking about Internet Archive. Archive.org is just this really great organization. It's a nonprofit in San Francisco, founded by Brewster Kahle, actually 20 years ago. It's their 20th anniversary. And he was at MIT and had this idea for basically preserving the web. And so what he's done, in addition to the Wayback Machine, which kind of captures websites, web content, he has set up scanning centers around the country, around the world, I believe. So libraries can bring their books, their bound volumes, to the Internet Archive scanning centers. And yes, there are people who will sit there with sort of a cradle, and they'll put the book in the cradle and flip pages, and the scanner will take pictures. And so
imagine doing that for 20 years and going on retirement.
Right. But that's what we did, because my goal was, I guess I sort of thought some of the school publications are a bit of sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of digitization because of the work of Internet Archive. They charge 10 cents a page. It's very easy. So they did all of our yearbooks, alumni bulletins, the catalog or the course of study, and literary magazines.
Are they able to be accessed by the public?
Yes. Okay. So that's the whole goal, is because Internet Archive is a nonprofit, and in our case, the school owns the copyright to these. And I also had publications of Abbott Academy, the girls' school, digitized. Those are all online for free.
So what do you think of Google's, the controversy around Google's, going to the Harvard Library and
Yeah.
taking pictures of all these books and copyrights for the authors.
Right, right. I mean, I think, in some ways, sort of my natural reaction is, oh my gosh, it's really awful because here's this big corporation and in some ways, yeah, they're doing this big project, but very little of the content is actually accessible online for free.
Right, you can't really.
You can't really access it.
Yeah, only a little of it.
And that may not actually be helpful. On the other hand, in some ways, you could almost, like, to play devil's advocate, you could say that I think the Google Books project helped to certainly generate interest in and probably kind of light a fire under some of us.
It's sort of like a big blurb.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I think it helped to light a fire under us to say, well, we really, what can we do to actually, we want to make our collections accessible for free online and make it easy to not only have people use them, but to share them and do whatever they want with our collections. So that's part of what the idea was behind this initiative called the Digital Public Library of America, dpla.org. Which started, I guess, about 3 years ago at Harvard and is now a very vibrant, fully national initiative. They've worked with institutions around the country to digitize material and pull in from places like Internet Archive and Hattie Trust and other sort of aggregating type of sites. So they have many millions of items in there already, from text to photos, audiovisual material. And their goal really is to provide free online access as a sort of a platform and a portal to these collections, particularly, of material all over. So they really will help small institutions to digitize and make their material more accessible.
Interesting. Now, we did discuss the Internet Archive, and actually I was telling you I was probably going to put the audio of this on the Internet Archive and still do YouTube because just it has more, the video. Let's see, let's go into, but you are a writer too, right?
I am becoming more and more interested, certainly.
In writer. And a lot of times archivists aren't writers, they're just interested in that narrow.
Right. I think, a lot of people maybe get into archives because they're sort of bigger picture thinkers, people who think more at the collection level, but also maybe have a sort of knack for creating order.
Yeah.
Out of some.
You find that they have, a lot of archivists have a sort of obsessive quality about them? I think it depends how much. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised to discover, I guess, how much I really sort of prefer the reference end and helping people with research rather than processing collections kind of in a back room. Right.
So that for me, that's a benefit of being a one-person operation, is that I sort of get to do that full variety of duties.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Which, makes it much more interesting for me.
Now you're always you're always talking when you're a member of the Bagel Bars here in Somerville, and you're always talking about all your various hiking trips and all this stuff. Me, I go to a Holiday Inn. That's about it. But what is this? And this is sort of parlaying into your poetry also. I mean, what is your thing with nature?
Yeah, I guess I've been.
For one moment you're in the dusty archives. Hidden,
right.
And then next minute you're in the wide open space.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess I've always just been interested in nature. I grew up on kind of an old dairy farm in New Hampshire. So about 9 years, I think it was, almost 10 years ago, in 2006, I did a big hiking trip in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, this kind of hut-to-hut thing that the AMC does. And that was just so much fun. And then through that, I met people that were hiking every week. And lo and behold, I thought, my God, people do that? And they just said, oh, well, you need to buy these boots or this gear. And
you ever think of hiking the Appalachian Trail?
No. I haven't, I guess. It just, wow, that seems long. But I'm sure I've probably done more miles than that now. But after all these years, almost 10 years of doing it. But
Any interesting encounters with wildlife or anything else?
No, I guess I've been lucky I haven't.
Right.
Really, you know.
And so your poetry is often concerned with nature. Do you?
Well, the other thing that I like to do is I'm a swimmer too. I swim every day, and during the summer I like.
You swim enough, you won't get a stroke, you know.
There you go. That's good. That's good. Yeah. So and I like to swim in the ocean. So I guess sometimes kind of the beach and waves comes into it. I find, I guess, that sometimes the nature metaphors maybe help me understand things, or at least articulate or express questions that I'm kind of struggling with. You know, trees or birds or whatever.
Metaphor for life.
You know, yeah.
Well, why don't we hear some? And in fact, if you're here in Somerville, she may even go to the open mic, because we're going over to the First and Last Words series. And so to hear Charles Coe and another bagel bard.
And Lawrence Kucinich.
Lawrence and Susan LaFortune is a bagel bard now. She's come a few times.
Great.
So maybe you'll hear, if you come, you may hear Paige read her poetry, but you could hear her here now too. So lay it on us.
Okay. So this first one is V. Sessling, who is a bagel bard, published
And
in.
it's been on this show.
Okay, in the Muddy River Review.
Right.
In spring 2015. This is, the title is Authority Control. The tyranny of nouns, to name, pin things down, when what I feel is the fluidity. Is it possible to observe a taxonomy of action verbs, or only to name things of material substance? Does all material reality embody a subjective experience, a way of being in the world? Taxonomy is the interaction of the noun and the verb. Is this naming inherently a moral exercise? Do I have to name the pain in order to heal? Imperative of remembrance.
All right.
Okay, should I read another one?
Absolutely. This is Poet to Poet.
Okay.
Maybe you want to comment anything on that poem? How it originated? What were you thinking? What was the origin?
Gosh, I guess, in some ways that one is different from these other ones, which are more maybe connected to nature.
Right.
And I'm not really sure why that is. So the other ones are more recent. I think I wrote that one in maybe 2014. So this one is entitled Wobbling World. A zipper being pulled. The wave loosens itself upon the shore. The foghorn is barely audible as the waves slip in to meet yesterday's seaweed. Is it presumptuous to interrogate the sound of water? I dive over whitecaps, push sideways through the oncoming liquid wall. Do I remain myself as I am overswept? Is it only the deep water that is dangerous? I think about swimming out forever. The will, the weight of the water. Don't hold your breath too long underwater. I float now with a current, not push against. What about surfing along the side of the wave? The stars reflected in the water of low tide are misshapen. Is the me I see in you distorted? My ears are tuned to hear bird song. The wave comes in again, forever new. The water's fine. Jump in. Is this what it's like to be born?
I like that water and birth, and we came from the water, and yeah, I'm digging it.
Good.
Right.
I wasn't sure if it was just a little overboard with the W's, the wobbling, but
sometimes repetition gives something. You studied with Tom Daly, who's been a guest on the show years ago, and he's a pretty well-regarded workshop person. Any talk about that experience?
Yeah, gosh, it was helpful. There was so much. I'm not sure if I was actually sort of advanced enough to benefit. I felt like he has such a depth of understanding, kind of poetry and sort of perspective.
Does he take beginners too, Tom? Or?
Well, he was nice enough to take me, so so that was great.
You get special treatment of bards, right?
And so there was, like a lot of these workshops, there's just great feedback from participants, as well as the instructor, and I think
it was
that
constructive feedback,
right, and that really depends on the sort of, I would say, like the culture of the workshop that the instructor creates or builds. Yeah. It has to be sort of safe enough for people to provide that kind of constructive criticism or feedback. And and it was interesting that he has sort of ways of providing feedback that are a little set, but I understand why he does that. I think there are probably good reasons for saying, for instance, oh, well, this part of your poem works, and maybe this is something that could be changed.
Right. You don't want to. Yeah, right. You don't want to come and say this sucks and this is awful.
Exactly. Or I like this and I don't like this, because maybe that's really not relevant. Maybe this is.
Well, that's how you approach your students, right?
Right.
When you say, well, this works. You're doing well on this, but.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. This might be something you could take another look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has just a great way of kind of nudging people to maybe think about something in a different way.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to be nudged, right?
Exactly.
You want to be nudged, and certainly Tom is a nudger. In the best sense of the word.
Right. Right.
So go on. Let's hear another one.
Okay. So let's see. Now this one, somehow I realized I have the same title as Lawrence's new book, which
plagiarism.
I don't know how that happened.
Here. Well,
right?
Join Doris Kearns.
Except mine is singular. I call it "This Is the Age of Wonder," and I think his book is "The Age of Wonders."
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to speak.
I don't know how that happened, so I feel kind of bad. Maybe I got to change mine.
Well, that's a fairly common phrase, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think it was some book that I just really, I really liked it. So this is the Age of Wonder. I learned today there are many forms of infinity. Bluebirds blaze a perilous trail. Does grace only ever come slowly? Supermoon rising vast and unfathomable. My moon shadow stretches up the beach. I was blind to your touch. My desire, bewildered, vulnerable lover, hiding, incapable even of secret revolt. Fate is written in the body, not the stars. The body is composed of stardust floating on a bed of lettuce. Is that your footprint in the sand? I was with him only as practice for you. The sky is full of big dippers. Let's go count them together. The way a bird's song peels back the night. The rustle of the incoming tide. Languorous dawn encroaching, brightly wrapping now. The light bends. By what awesome force do the birds fly from here to there?
Lovely detail. Yeah, really fine poem.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, Paige.
Well, thank you for having me, Doug.